Okay. Simplifying square roots. First of all, let's talk about these perfect squares. Can anyone tell me why why do you think I call them perfect squares? Yes, Brandon.
Because nothing will divide evenly into themselves.
No.
No.
Because they don't have a decimal.
No. It's a good try.
I
First of
know.
all, when you think of square, what do you think of?
That was very fun.
Don't make fun of it. That's not good, right. Huh?
That's a square root.
Shut up, Brandon.
You may think of square roots. I think of maybe squaring a number. Now look at the list and tell me if you think of the word squaring a number, what do you think of?
You can't square any of those.
Any number to the second power.
Well, you can square any number. Any number you can multiply times
Not
itself, can't you?
evenly, not without a decimal.
Sure you can. I'm not saying square root. I'm saying square.
I don't know.
It's okay. I know you've been off for 2 weeks. So we got to get those brains kind of back working.
So they're gone on perfect square.
It's fried.
The reason 1 is a perfect square is because 1 squared is what?
1 times 1.
The reason 4 is the next perfect square. Okay, so let's see. The reason 1 is a perfect square is because 1 squared is what? The reason 4 is a perfect square is because 2 squared is what?
4.
Why do you think 9 is a perfect square?
3 squared is 9.
Why do you think 16 is a perfect square?
16.
Because 4 squared is... Why do you think 25 is the next perfect square?
It's 5 squared, 6 squared.
Is it all equal to the same?
What is 6 squared?
36.
That's why 36 is the perfect square. Why do you think 49 is a perfect square?
7, 8, and 7.
So 64 is 8 squared. Keep writing them down. 91, 9 squared. 100 is 10 squared. 121 is what? 11 squared. 144 is what? 12 squared. 169, 13 squared. 196 is 14 squared. 225 is 15 squared. 256, 16 squared. 289 is 17 squared. 324 is 18 squared. 361 is what 19 squared is, and 400 is what 20 squared is. So we could keep going on and on and on, couldn't we? There are an infinite number of perfect squares. Shouldn't need that up there to really write these down if you got the concept correct. You just might want to check and make sure you got it correct.
Yeah, I missed one.
There's obviously an infinite number because we're going to keep going, aren't we? But for the square roots we're going to simplify today, these are probably all you're probably going to have to use. Now, do you guys understand what question is this asking? I want to know what question is that asking?
Where is the square root there?
True. Of x.
Oh, sorry.
But what is it basically asking you to do? I know you know that means square root. But you know, multiplication is saying, if I say 3 times 2, I'm saying I have 3 sets of what? 2, how many do I have? You have a total of what now? 6. Everyone agree? This is an operation just like that. It's asking you to do something. This means, and it's asking, what number could I multiply times itself or what's another way of saying that?
Square.
Or square and get x as the answer. That is the question that is asking. Most of the time, you won't be able to answer that question. Let's do some examples. Can you guys answer that question?
Yes.
What number could you multiply times itself and get 1 as an answer? Huh? 1 times 1 is? Now, as you notice, when I answer the question, I get rid of the thing asking the question, the square root sign. Square root of 1, the answer is 1. It's not square root of 1. It amazes me how many times, it shouldn't amaze me because we just get too caught up in things, but all we're doing is, once you think about it, when I, and don't write this down, but if I wrote 16 divided by 2, okay, what do you get as an answer there? Yeah, I don't put 8 divided by, do I? I just put what? I answered the question, so the question goes away. Does that make sense? So if I answer the question here, what number could I square and get 1 as an answer? The answer is what? 1. Now, I have a question. Can you guys answer this question for me?
No. Yes.
I'm not saying you can. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just waiting for, I see a lot of heads looking down, so I'm seeing if anybody's...
Why be a perfect square?
Well, I'm asking you, what number could you, just think about it. Could you answer me that question definitively? Could you tell me exactly what number you could multiply times itself and get 1 as an answer? You might guess. If you're going to guess around what it might be, maybe 1.25, I don't know, right? Maybe not, maybe 1.1 something, I don't know. But you couldn't tell me exactly what number I could multiply and get 2 as an answer, could you, times itself? So you can't answer the question, so this question just stays the same, doesn't it? Square root of 2. Square root of 3. Can you guys answer that question?
It's 1.5, yeah.
Put that in your calculator and see what you get. $1.5 times 1.5.
2.25.
Doesn't quite work, does it? And if you think about it, the logic you used to do this one, wouldn't the answer here be 1 then? And the reason you were kind of, if I probably didn't have this up above it, you think you might have wanted to say this was 1? See, the thing, we're not talking about whether it can be, it's not even or odd, has nothing to do with whether this comes out even. Okay.
So that's what you mean by most of the time you can't answer it?
Most of the time you won't be able to answer the question because it's the non-terminating, non-repeating decimal. I mean, you physically can't do it because you can't sit here and talk forever in those numbers, can you? You're basically, I'm asking you to say a number like pi. Well, if it never stops and never changes, you can't answer that question. You can estimate it. You can get really close by estimating it to a bunch of decimal places. As close as you ever need to be in reason for, measurement or doing some things, but in real world terms, you really can't answer that question. Can you guys answer that question? Square root of 4. What number could I square and get 4 as an answer?
2.
You guys have no problems answering. Now, do you notice the difference here? If I answer the question, what goes away? Square root. Okay, let's go on to the next one. What do you think I'm going to put here next? Square root of what? Can you guys answer that question? What number could I square and get 5 as an answer?
1 and 9.
No, what number could I square and get 5 as an answer? So if you think about it, the number's always going to get smaller, right? So I'm saying, what number could I multiply times itself? Here it was 2 times 2, right? Is what?
2.5.
Well, see what 2.5 times 2.5 is in your calculator.
It's not going to be right.
Right. You can't answer this question. It's a non-repeating, non-terminating decimal. How about square root of 6? What's probably going to jump into all you said? What number could I square and get 6 as an answer? What number could I multiply times itself and get 6 as an answer? How many of you wanted to say 3? Just for a second, you wanted to say 3, didn't you? The rest of your line.
I wasn't paying attention.
But wait a second. What's 3 times 3?
9.
So that wouldn't work, would it?
It's that.
Can't answer that question. How about square root of 8? For a second, you may want to, or I'm sorry, square root of 7. I don't need to skip, do I? You can't answer that question, can you? Square root of 8, can you answer that one? For a second, you may want to jump in and say 4, right? But what's 4 times 4? Square root of 9. Do you see any correlation? Look, we'll go over here. Square root of 10. Can you answer that one? No. Square root of 11. Guess what? You can't answer that one. Square root of 12. Guess what? You can't answer that one. Square root of 13. Guess what? You can't answer that one. When's going to be the next one I can answer?
16.
And it is? So for the first 16 whole numbers, when I took the square root of them, I can only answer the question 4 out of 16 times, 25% of the time. So most square roots actually don't come out even, do they? So we need to have a way to simplify them, and that's what we're learning today. Now, is there any correlation between the numbers that came out even when I took the square root of them and my perfect squares over here? Let's add some of this. What's the square root of 1? What's the square root of 4? What's the square root of 9? What's the square root of 16? What's the square root of 25? These are all the ones that when you take the square root of them come out what? Even, aren't they? Because those are numbers, when I say what number could you square? Well, the answer is what? 5. Here you could square what? 6. Here you could square what? 7. Do you understand? I mean, I'm just trying to give you a better concept of what square roots actually are. Make sense? Let's get that written down, then we're going to talk about how to simplify them.
Is there anything above?
No, you're good.
100?
You're good. Steps for simplifying square root of x. Is the number under the square root a perfect square? P.S. Yes? Evaluate the square root. If no, go to step 2. Third step, split the square root into a product using the perfect square factor. I guess for step 2, what is the biggest perfect square that is a factor of x? We're going to call that our perfect square factor. If the perfect square factor is 1, then the square root is simplified. If not, you go into step 3. Then you're going to split the square root into a product using the perfect square factor. This will make more sense when we actually do a problem using these steps. So it's going to split up into square root of your perfect square factor times, well, whatever's left. Whatever you had to multiply that, to get x. Evaluate square root of your perfect square factor. If what's left under under the square root, thank you, is or has a PSF of 1, then you're done. If not, keep breaking it down. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to work on these problems. We're going to do some examples now, and I'm trying to, I don't have the first step up there, but at least I've got the last 3, I guess. We'll see how this works. I'm going to try to write on the board and record it. And since I just remember you two right here, you're in the video. So,
Famous.
okay. Let's start with a pretty simple example. Now, first of all, if you have this problem, and I ask you to simplify the square root. And I'll leave this up here for you to finish writing down. How about we listen for a second? So we can get those who we get kind of started. My first step is the number underneath the square root a perfect square? Is it?
Yes.
If the answer is yes, then evaluate that square root. What number can I square and get 9 as an answer?
3.
Okay, you're done. Those are simple, right? You'd be amazed. I don't know how. It'd be amazed how many people you'll do 20 of these problems and you get on number 21 and it says square root of 225. Guess what they do? They start breaking it down and get confused because they didn't check to make sure what? If it wasn't a what? Perfect square when they could have just had a one-step problem. So make sure it's perfect square first. But the main thing we're doing here is learning how to make something like that look a little cleaner. Okay? The reason we do this is because in your high-level math and thing, it's very, you don't want to have to write, for instance, you can't write a non-terminating, non-repeating decimal down. You can't be exact. You can, though, if you simplify this. Because it's much easier to deal with if you break it down. So what you're simply doing is trying to get as much out from underneath this square root sign as you can. Evaluate as much inside this as you can and keep it the same. So what I'm going to do is say to myself, okay, I know that when I take the square root of perfect square, it comes out even, right? So I'm saying, which one of these will divide into that, so I can break it up? What is the largest perfect square? It's a factor of 12. Well, obviously it's gotta be, factors have to be less than the number, don't they? The largest number that'll go into 12 is what? 12. What's the next largest? No. Think about it. Let me ask you this. What's, besides the number 12, what's the biggest number that will divide into it? Tell me. 6. Okay, besides 14, what's the biggest number that will divide into it? 7. Besides 20, what's the biggest number that will divide into it?
10.
What are you doing each time? Cutting it in?
Half.
So the largest number besides itself that will divide into it is half the number, right? So when you're checking your perfect squares, they'll divide into it evenly. You only have to start with a number what? Half. What's half of 12?
6.
So obviously 9 won't go into it, will it? Because it's more than half of it. So what's the only one to really try here?
4.
Well, 4 divide into 12 evenly. So now's when we're doing this part. We found our perfect square factor. It's 4. So now I'm going to split this up into the square root of 4 times, well, I need these to be equivalent.
3.
Exactly. Okay? Do you see how this and this are the same thing? Because I kept 1 on both the numbers. Square root. Okay? If both numbers are under the square root, you can multiply them. But you cannot multiply a number that's not under the square root with a number that is.
That one's done.
No, it's not done. But what we've done the brunt of what we need to do. And see, the difference between what we have here and what we have here now is some of this I can evaluate, can't I? Can you answer that question? What number could I square and get 4 as an answer? Everybody look up here. You can answer that question. And since you answered it, what happens to the square root sign? It goes away, right?
Yeah.
So I got that outside of the square root. Now, can I answer that question?
No.
You got as much outside of the square root sign as you could. Makes sense? That's all you're doing here.
So you're breaking it down, taking a number.
Getting as much out from under that square root sign as you can, and the only things that'll get outside of the square root sign are what? Perfect squares. So you have to, break them up into a perfect square sign something. Okay? Now, as far as making sure it's only one step each time, you'll need to always find the largest perfect square. Because there's going to be numbers that maybe 36 and 16 will go into it equal. Does that make sense? There may be a number like that. So let's get a number a little bigger.
Is 400 as big as we're gonna go? Or are we gonna go bigger like in our books?
I doubt it.
Okay.
Usually, things you deal with won't be bigger than that.
Alright.
And for numbers like that, when you get into that high stuff, your gift calculators will do it for you. Sit up, man. Now, let's try square root of 48. This is a commonly one that people commonly make mistakes on. What number probably jumps out? First of all, is it a perfect square? No, it is not. What number jumps out at you that will probably go into it easy?
36. Oh,
8.
24. Okay. So,
25.
24 is half of it, right? So these are our possibilities.
So 16.
16, 9, and 4. But you know what people jump to a lot of times?
6
And it is right, 4 will go into it evenly. But you only have 2 bigger numbers to try. Why not try them? Because we're asking for the largest perfect square factor. So first,
Well,
everyone get your calculator out.
Well, if you know 4 will go into it, might as well do 16 because 4 will go into 16 even.
Sometimes it works like that, yes. Now, so, but it won't always be that way. 4 goes into 30, or 4 goes into
36.
40, but 16 won't go into 40. Right? So, I mean, but,
Oh, yeah.
So, all you're gonna do here is start at 16, go 48 divided by 16 in your calculator. What do you get? Does it come out even? Yeah. There's your largest perfect square. So I can break this up into square root of what? 16 times square root of what? Why is that significant? Because one of these is a what? Perfect square. What is the square root of 16? So I got some out of the square root. 4 square root is 3. Now I said, how do you know for sure if it's simplified? Look at your number under the square root sign. What's the largest perfect square as a factor of it?
1.
You know it's simplified. Now, number 4. Try this one. Square root of 70. Try that one on your own. Where are we starting here? 35. So 36 won't work, will it?
No.
Obviously 25 won't go into it, will it? Did 16 go into it anyway?
No.
Did 9?
No.
Did 4?
No.
Did 1?
No. Oh, yes.
So what do you think it means when the largest perfect square it's a factor of it is 1?
Then
It means
7.
it's what? It's simplified. Not every number can be broken down more. Okay? Think about it, square root of 7. That's, you can't, that's simplified, isn't it? Because 4 won't go into 7 even will it, but 1 will. Sometimes you're going to get some that are simplified. Oh, it's really frustrating when you get one that's 362 or something, or 64 or 7 or something like that, and you go through all of them, and it ends up being simplified, but it teaches you something. Okay. Another thing that's going to happen is you're going to get a problem like this. And it always throws people off, but it's nothing really different. I just added another step after you're done. Now, why do you think I write that as 4 square roots of 32? Because I can't answer square root of 32, can I? I can't answer that question. I can't multiply 4 times square root of 32 because one's outside the square root and one's what? Inside. So right now, that's the simplest way I can write that.
So whenever you figure.
So what all I've got to do, and this will help you guys on ones like this. You're probably thinking right. Especially those that are really, think of it like this. What do we remember, what they instill in your heads that you always do first? The what? Parentheses. Treat this like just that problem right there, and then when you're done, realize you have how many of them?
3 of them to multiply.
You have 4 of them. You have 4, you have to multiply times 4 after you're done. That's all that is. Okay? It may look a little bit, I don't know,
Could you?
more complicated, but so what we're going to do here, and this is how I would break it up. First of all, what's the largest perfect square that's a factor of 32? Start with half of it. 8's not a perfect square.
16.
What's half of 32?
16. So
What?
we can do 16 and 2.
So I can break this to what? Square root of 16 times square root of 2. Does everybody see that? So all I've done is just add 4 times to it right now. And right now I can't multiply that 4 times anything because there's nothing else what? Outside the square root. Agreed? Now,
When you do 4 times.
what does square root of 16? What, can I answer that question?
Yes, 4.
The answer is what? Because I can answer the question, the square root goes away, doesn't it? Now, is there a simple way to write that now? Is there a simple way to write 4 times 4? You're exactly right.
16.
Simple way to write this is, it's now 16 what? So as you can see, it was the same as these, it's just when you were done and you got something else out, you had to multiply it, right? And that's the only difference.
Instead of like bringing that.
What I want to see on your
down,
paper is I want to see that, okay, as far as steps.
we wouldn't be able to allow to put, like 4 squared.
just wanna see you break it down and see your steps. Okay?
Yeah.
I mean, it wouldn't be completely simplified to write 4 squared square root of 2. Because 4 squared simply written is 16.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying now. But no, yeah, I mean, you're right, it turned out that way this time. But a lot of times it'll be 4 times 2 or 5 times 3 or something like
It
that.
won't be even.
Yeah, not necessarily, it won't necessarily be, you just got kinda lucked out there, they end up being the same thing. Last one. And this is a little bit bigger number. And there's 2 ways to do this. A lot of people may look at that and say 96, I bet 4 goes into it. And you wouldn't be wrong. But the question is that the largest perfect square is a factor? I'm going to do this 2 ways. And you can do it either way, but you have to show each step each way. First of all, I'm just going to take half of that, because sometimes when you get to really big numbers, this is handy to do. What's half of 96?
48.
So we're going to have to start what?
36.
Start at 36. Will 36 go into it evenly? 96 divided by 36, you get a decimal, don't you?
Yes.
Will 25 work?
No.
Will 16 work?
Yes.
It does, doesn't it? Well, so I break this up into square root of 16 times square root of. I heard 3, I heard 6, I heard 16 times what is 96? 6. So, hey, and just remember, guys, this times this has to be that, or we're doing it wrong. Well, what number could I square and get 16 as an answer? So that becomes 4 square roots of what? And so when you get thrown off, you'll see that even number under the square root, think, oh, it's got to break down more. No. What's the largest perfect square? It's a factor of 6. 1. Even has nothing to do with it. Now, the other way I was talking about. Let's say you left your calculator at school. You're having problems with it. I unplugged it. Okay, and you had square root of 96 here, and you said, well, wait a second, I bet 4 goes into that evenly. And you broke this up into square root of 4 times square root of, well, 4 goes into that 2. 1 left over, 4 times 24, right? Does everyone agree?
Yes.
You could do that. What does square root of 4 become?
2.
So this becomes 2 times square root of what? 24. However, so how does a person know, oh, wait a second, am I done? Look at the number underneath the square root sign. What is the large perfect square root factor of 24? 4, isn't it? You could break it down again. Just got to make sure and what? Leave your 2 out there. 2 times, what could that break up into? Square root of 4 times square root of what? What number squared is 4?
16. Wait, what number squared?
What do I get here? Did I get the exact same answer?
Yeah.
It's a lot longer.
Yeah, it's longer. But sometimes if you're dealing with 546 and you know 4 going to 546, you just made it 20, you just made it a lot small. Your next number to do it a lot smaller right off the bat, didn't you?
Yeah.
So sometimes that's handy. To basically, because for instance, look at this one. Am I going to confuse you? Is this the same thing as that?
Yes.
Isn't it? The square root of 16 is what?
4.
What's 16 times 32?
I don't know. Big number.
Huh?
I don't know. Big number.
Big number. Somebody do it for me.
512.
Huh?
512.
It was really nice to make that so small with a 16, wasn't it? Didn't end up being the largest perfect square, but at least I got it down to a smaller number, right? You could do the same thing with 4 here. You know, you could say square root of 4 times, how many times does 4 go into 512?
32. Or wait, 64?
No, that's not right, is it?
What?
It's not a 16 holder.
128. So So now this is 2 square roots of 128. Is that a little bit easier to deal with? Really fast? So now it's not so bad, is it? So it can be handy when you get into bigger numbers to just break it down over and over again. Because then maybe it's easier to find the largest perfect square as a factor of it. Okay? All right. Hopefully, I was recording you guys there, so hopefully, well, it was showing me up there, never mind, so that's not that big a deal. I guess I should have just turned the thing on.